Anxiety. It is the most common mental illness in the United States, and 40 million people a year are diagnosed with it, which is like 20% of our population. So it's kind of a big deal. And this is according to the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. And I don't think this is going to be too surprising to you to hear. It might be a little shocking, but not surprising. It's not surprising to me, but it's become very obvious to me that this is something that I needed to address because I published a 1 minute motivation recently titled The Most Effective Way to Calm Your Anxiety, and it has been my most viewed post to date by far. It has like 400% more views than my second highest ranking post. So it became obvious to me that I needed to address anxiety. I needed to write a full length post about it and specifically about my experiences with anxiety. Because I want to let other people know out there who are suffering with anxiety that you're not alone and that what you are feeling is normal. And if not necessarily normal, it's not unusual. So today we're going to focus on answering 3 questions. Number 1, what triggers your anxiety? Number 2, what signs is your body giving you to let you know that your anxiety is getting out of control? And number 3, how can you calm your anxiety in the moment? So I'm going to give you my answers to those questions, and I'm going to hope that there's something in there. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that there's something that you can grab onto, there's something that resonates with you, that you can grab onto at least one thing that you hear today and think to yourself, I'm not alone. The way I'm feeling is normal. So, there are 6 common anxiety triggers, and I'm going to discuss 3 of them. But the 6 are overthinking, overachieving, low self esteem, pessimistic thinking, traumatic events, and new experiences. These 6 were listed in a video that I watched by Psych2Go. And I was going to try to focus on all 6 of them, but the post would have been way too long. So maybe I will address the other 3 at some point. But today I'm going to focus on the first 3 triggers, uh, overthinking, overachieving, and self-esteem, and use them as a starting point to share my answers to the 3 questions that I just posed, which are what triggers your anxiety, what signs does your body give you to let you know it's coming on, and how can you calm it in the moment. First one, overthinking. So the first trigger. I don't overthink, or do I? Maybe I do, but I don't really think that I do. Have you ever gone through a train of thought like that? Yeah, I know. I do it every day. So I get it. And so hopefully that might sound a little familiar to you. And if you've read any of my work, you know that I'm a chronic overthinker. So I don't think that's going to be any surprise. And of course, this can be a blessing and a curse. I mean, it makes me a great problem solver. It makes me be able to see patterns that other people don't necessarily recognize. But it can be a curse, and because it could cause me to obsess over things. So there are 2 main triggers that will bring this overthinking on, and either when I'm entering uncharted territory or I'm trying to solve a problem. And I guess there's kind of a third trigger, but it's one I've learned to deal with pretty well, so I didn't even really think of it at first. But the third trigger would be when I think something I said or did was taken the wrong way. That can lead me to overthink about it. And as I said, when I start overthinking, I become obsessed with something and just get like this thought would just get stuck in my brain on repeat, and there's not really anything I can do to get rid of it. And it'll be a thought, it'll be something I have no control over, or something that I have, at least there's nothing I can do about it in the current moment. For example, say I'm trying to solve a problem, and you think that once I figured that problem out and had a solution, that'd be the end of it, and my brain would shut up. But no, that's not how my brain works. So once I have a solution, then my brain jumps to obsessing about the execution of the solution. Even if I can't execute that solution for days or weeks, my brain will get stuck on it for a while. And I found that I just kind of gotta let it run its course, and there's no point in trying to fight it. But there are also, so underlying that the habit of my thoughts to get stuck on repeat, there are 2 underlying triggers to that as well. So those triggers are my fear of failure and my fear of disappointing people who I think are depending on me. And I think those are things that lead a lot of us to overthink, is that we're afraid of failing, we're afraid of letting people down. So those are the triggers, and a few signs that my body gives me to let me know that I'm overthinking are, besides the tornado of thoughts that are going on in my head, my body will give me several other signs if I'm paying attention. One thing is I'll actually hold my breath, and I won't even realize I'm doing that until all of a sudden I can tell that I haven't taken a breath in a while. I'll feel it. So I'll actually hold my breath, or I will just breathe very shallowly for a while, and then all of a sudden it takes me a while to get caught back up. Another thing that happens is I clench my jaw a lot when I'm thinking, and I stiffen up my shoulders. So like I had this constant knot right here from doing that. But the way I found to calm my overthinking mind is one thing I've done is an important mind shift is I've worked on it, and I've worked on it for several years, is to identify when something is my problem or when something is my responsibility and when it's not. And of course, this requires a lot of time, a lot of thought. It requires setting boundaries and setting clear expectations. And another thing that's really helped me the most, that's helped me quiet my mind more than anything else, has been a daily practice of meditation. So I've just started this recently, like within the last 4 months maybe, but it has been huge. I have noticed a huge change in my thought patterns. And I do 10-minute guided meditation almost every morning. And one thing that it has taught me, other than just, I think just getting the oxygen in your system helps, but another thing that's taught me is that I don't have to engage with my thoughts. I can let them just pass by. And even trying to stop a thought, like, oh gosh, I don't need to think about that right now. I shouldn't be thinking about that. Even doing that is engaging with your thoughts. So we have to learn not to do that. And we have to learn to just let our thoughts pass. And they will pass by. They're just like feelings. They will eventually pass by. So that's overthinking. Overachieving. So do it right or don't do it at all has been a personal mantra of mine for as long as I can remember. And on the surface, it seems like a pretty good one. Kind of. The problem is, and the reason that this mantra causes anxiety is that if I don't have my deliberate thinking cap on, I can tend to apply this mantra to every little thing that I do. And then I end up putting way too much focus and emphasis on trying to perfect things that really just don't matter in the scheme of things. And I'll spend way too much time on these things, and then at the end of the day, I don't have time for the important things in my life. So you can see where this is going and why that would cause anxiety. Another way that overachieving triggers my anxiety is that I will sometimes get wrapped up in the expectation of what do it right means. And if I'm trying to do it right according to someone else's definition or expectation of what right is, I'm sure to trigger my anxiety, because that's when I'm going to start excessively comparing myself to other people, and that's when I'm going to start creating all these worst case scenarios in my head that are going to lead to the anxiety. And of course, there's always that underlying trigger that went along with overthinking, also goes along with overachieving, and that is the fear of failure and the fear of letting people down. And especially because I have a pretty good track record of being a high achiever, and what happens then is that I end up expecting myself to be a high achiever at everything. And then I think everyone else is expecting me to be a high achiever at everything too, and so I can put a lot of undue pressure on myself that way, which causes anxiety. Some of the signs that I've noticed that let me know that I'm focusing too much on overachieving is that obviously I'll start to feel burned out. That's a pretty obvious one. But I also will find a not so obvious one is I find myself procrastinating to start on a task until I feel like I'm fully prepared for it. And I've gotten better at that, but I keep an eye on that one. I also find myself feeling guilty for relaxing. And I think a lot of people could probably relate to that one, where you're trying to relax, but all of a sudden you start going through this list of things that you should be doing over and over again in your head. So that's another sign to yourself that you're focusing too much on overachieving. How do I calm my overachieving ways, and how could you possibly do it? Well, first and foremost, I figured out what my core values are. And if you're not sure what your core values are and you'd like some help figuring that out, there is a link in the narrative post to another post that will guide you through that, and I can actually help you with that and whatever. So go check that out. But what I found is that with my core values as my guide, I can much more easily prioritize my time, develop my own personal expectations, and my own meaningful goals. I can set meaningful goals. So that helps me from striving to be an overachiever. Because now I know what's important to me. I calm my perfectionism, which is a close cousin to overachieving, by identifying my priorities and setting limits. And a great example of this is the way that I go about writing my posts now. So my priority is to publish one full-length post a week because that's what I have committed to for my members. And in order to do that, I have to limit the amount of time that I spend editing my work. So my first post, which granted it was my first one, but it took me well over 20 hours. I mean, it was probably, might have been closer to 30. And I know I over edited it. But now, on average, I'll take 7 to 8 hours for a post. That includes writing it, that includes 2 edits of it. And this practice has taught me so much. And it was mainly just because I don't have time if I want to do anything else, I don't have time to spend, or I don't have any more time than that to spend on it. But the practice has taught me so much in that I've learned to let myself fail by just putting my work out there, even if I know it's not exactly perfect. And it's also helped me let go of perfectionism because I'm limiting myself to 2 edits. And I've also learned that giving your best doesn't mean giving your all, because I need to save some energy. Yes, I want to put my best work out there. However, I also need to save some energy for my other work too. I can't just focus on one thing only. So those are the lessons I've learned, and that's a little bit about overachieving. So on to low self-esteem. So I hide it well, but yes, I've suffered from low self-esteem. I don't struggle with it nearly as much as I used to, but it's definitely been an anxiety trigger in my life. And one of the big triggers for me, it took me a while to figure this one out, but it makes a lot of sense, and I finally figured out that one thing that causes me to have low self-esteem is being around gossipy people. And this could be in real life, this could be people that are on TV or on the internet or whatever, just gossip in general. Because I find that when I hear people gossiping, I'm very aware then that people are probably talking about me behind my back as well. And of course, that there probably always are, but the difference is I'm now aware of it. And then I will, from there, start imagining all the things they could possibly be talking about. I'll start noticing all my faults and all my shortcomings because those must be the things that people are talking about. And of course, when I focus on those things, you can see how that would lead to my anxiety being triggered. And then that will trigger that trigger triggers another anxiety trigger, which is comparing myself to other people. So a few signs that my body would give me to let me know that my self-esteem might be low is, of course, there's a couple obvious signs. I'll notice I'm being overly critical of myself, or I'm being overly self-conscious. And these feelings will then lead to self-doubt, and they will lead me to start questioning my own judgment. And then I'll notice that I'm starting to feel offended more easily than I should be. And this is a weird one, but I will find myself coveting other people's things, that whether it's possessions or successes or looks or whatever. I'll end up coveting other people's things that I don't even want. And I know that I don't even want them, but when your esteem is low, you still end up wanting what other people have for some reason. So how do I calm these attacks on my self-esteem? A big mindset shift for me has been to recognize the red flag and green flag people in my life. And I've written a full-length post about that to explain what I mean by red flag and green flag people, and there's a link to that in the narrative post. And I've done my best to distance myself from the red flag people. And when I can't distance myself from them, if they say something that I feel all of a sudden triggers my self-esteem, then I will just think to myself, is this even a person I respect? And if the answer is no, then my next thought is then, if I don't even respect this person, I do not care what their opinion is of me. Now, I say that to myself. It is hard. I don't always believe it right away. but it's just a practice. And the more you practice saying that to yourself, the more you're going to believe it. The other thing that I'll do is I will remind myself of the people who I do respect, who think that I'm pretty awesome. And I will think, man, if I think that person's awesome and I respect them, and they think I'm awesome, I must be. Which might sound a little funny, but really, those are the people's opinions that you want to care about. So those are a couple things that you can focus on. I also work to calm my anxiety by being very intentional with my media use. For example, I don't use Facebook, I don't use Twitter, I don't use Instagram. I don't use any media platform where people are trying to convince me that their life is amazing. And I don't like platforms where there's a lot of gossiping going on, a lot of trolling, or a lot of baiting, like trying to get people to respond to comments and things like that. And really, and TV too. I mean, you don't realize how much some of the images and events that you're seeing on TV will affect your self-esteem. But reality TV, I think, can be a huge drain on your self-esteem because there is so much gossip and revenge and hatred and all this stuff. And really, the only reality TV I watch is like American Pickers or Oak Island or Gold Rush or, shows like that, where there's not all that kind of drama going on. And last but certainly not least, the way that I have learned to calm my anxiety related to low self-esteem is by listening to other people's stories, listening to other people's struggles, fears, and insecurities, and realizing that no one really knows what they're doing. We're all just trying our best. Everyone is afraid to try new things. Everyone fails several times before they have any real success. And no one starts at the top. And the most important thing that you realize after you hear so many different people's stories is that none of us are alone. And we have much more in common than we think we do. Now, so that's the end of the self-esteem part of the talk here. But I would like to quickly touch on medication. Not a doctor. I'm not telling you to go get on medication, anxiety meds, or anything like that. But I will say that I wanted to say something about it because I feel like there's still a lot of shame wrapped around taking medication for anxiety. And I just want people to know that you should never feel weak or ashamed if you have to take medication. You would take medication if you had a headache. It's okay to take medication if you need it and you feel like you need it and your doctor feels like you need it for your anxiety. I take medication. There's more, I talk more about that in the narrative post, but I take it. I've taken it for years. There's no shame in it. So now it's time for you to answer the 3 questions that I posed at the beginning, which are: what triggers your anxiety? How did your body let you know that your anxiety is getting out of control? What signs does it give you? And how can you calm your anxiety? So of course I put a worksheet together for you to help guide you through answering these questions. The worksheet's going to take you from inspiration to action. And until next time, stay curious!